Our offering? Oh, okay. No, you're fine. With that being said, I'm assuming we are ready for our scripture. Okay. We're good to go then. All right. All right. So before we began our Lenten series, and we started our Lenten series last week with a sermon on repentance. So really the series kind of started today. Before Lent, we had a short series on what might be called some of the more difficult sayings of Jesus, difficult teachings. And this series that we are starting today is going to look at the healing that Jesus offers to a broken world. And so today's message is going to attempt to marry both concepts together as we begin our Lenten series. So on the one hand, we have the difficult teachings of Jesus, and on the other, we have the healing that Jesus brings. And typically, you would not think of these things as being one and the same, but in today's case, it is. As Christians, we laud and applaud forgiveness and grace. It should be our chief modus operandi, meaning our way of doing things, and it's the way in which we are known. That's how Christians should be known, as forgiving people. We who are called by the name of Christ should emulate Him in all ways, but particularly as bringers of the good news of forgiveness of sins through Jesus. And what better way to share that good news than to be forgiving people ourselves? But you see, there's a challenge in that. Jesus makes it plain we are to love our enemies, bless those who persecute us, do good to those who abuse us. And this is frankly contrary to human nature. We are hardwired, it seems, to seek retribution for perceived and actual wrong. And it comes naturally. I'll pick briefly on my kids here, but they've dealt with it before. Both my kids, I love them to death, and they're wonderful kids. But once in a while, Charlie, will you look at me from a few once in a while, look at your sister and think, ooh, I can pick at her and have a little bit of fun and shake her. And hey, sissy, can you look at me just for a minute? When he does that, you don't like it, do you? Sometimes you kick back or squat back a little bit. And it comes by naturally. But unfortunately, so many of us continue in that path. Wars are started in this way. We justify violence in the name of vengeance and retribution, and we try to disguise it as justice, but it is not. And yet, it is not an easy thing to forgive. You see, there are two misconceptions about forgiveness. One misconception about forgiveness is to say that forgiving is forgetting, meaning that you don't remember the offense anymore. Forgiving is not forgetting. Forgetting is forgetting. You don't remember the offense. The minute you are reminded of said offense, you're going to be angry again and want retribution. So forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is also not saying it's all okay. There's so many times we feel pressured when we have been hurt by someone to just say, oh, it was nothing, it's all okay. When deep down we know that it is not. Sadly, many of the abuses that have happened in churches have happened because people felt pressured to say, oh, it was okay. It's all okay. No, forgiveness means to admit and say that wrong and harm has been done. Forgiveness starts with saying, I have been hurt. But then the next step is to say, I have been hurt, but I am not going to hurt you back. And even more, I have been hurt, but instead, I'm going to love you. As I said, it is not acting like nothing happened. That's denial. What is it they say? Denial is revenge. Forgiveness means we must say, yes, I have been wrong. Yes, I have been hurt. But I'm not going to seek revenge. I'm going to love you instead. Truly, the command to forgive that Jesus gives us in the Sermon on the Mount must be one of, if not the most difficult teachings that Jesus has given us. But forgive, we must. Because our own ability to receive forgiveness and healing depends on it. And it's not because I don't believe that God withholds His forgiveness per se. His forgiveness is always available. It's that a heart that is unwilling to forgive someone for the hurt that they have done to them is not open to the grace of God's forgiveness. An unforgiving heart is a closed heart. And in order to be forgiven, you must have hope. So to illustrate this, let me tell you a story. There was a young man that had a very loving family, a Christian family. Grew up in a good home. Had a happy childhood. And then the unthinkable happened. Human traffickers kidnapped the young man. Sold him off to be used as slave labor. His owners even took away his name. And he was not in Christian territory anymore either. These people followed fake and cruel gods. But somehow in the midst of all of this heartache, this young man found a peace in his heart, and it came from Christ. He did not allow hatred to enter into his heart, and instead he prayed for the people around him. He prayed for the people that held him in bondage. Eventually, God opened a road to freedom for the young man. He managed to escape, and he found transportation back home again. And after regaining his freedom and getting back to his family, he began to consider what he should do with his life and his newfound freedom that God gave him. And so he decided he would become a missionary. A missionary to none other than the very people who had held him in slavery. And so he grew and he became a priest, and he went to the people who had held him in slavery. And through him, the people of an entire nation came to know Christ. The name of this young man was Malin. And you might think, doesn't ring a bell. Probably doesn't. We do not know him by that name. Instead, we know him by the name that his enslavers gave him while he was in captivity. Patrick. Because he was able to forgive his captors and do as Jesus commanded and did good for them, Christianity spread to Ireland at the dawn of the Dark Ages. When the places of learning and knowledge throughout Europe went dark, Ireland became a refuge of the Christian faith and learning and education. Because of forgiveness, healing was able to take place. And this is how these two come together. The difficult teaching of forgiveness and the healing that Jesus brings. Because when we learn the difficult lesson of forgiveness, we begin to forgive. Because of forgiveness, life was able to go on. Ireland would figure prominently as a place where Christian learning did not stop. And it is highly likely that the church would not have spread as far as it has through the world if it wasn't for St. Patrick. For him first forgiving his enemies and then sharing the good news of Jesus. Jesus' call for us to forgive is both challenging and healing. It challenges us to lay down our weapons, both literal and figurative, and to offer love to those who hurt us. It is healing because when we do that, Jesus opens roads for amazing things to happen, for enemies to become friends, for new possibilities for ministry, for the kingdom to grow. When we forgive others, we acknowledge our own need for forgiveness and go to Jesus to give us the power to forgive others as He has forgiven us. When we forgive others, Jesus has the opportunity to reveal Himself through us. And the coldness of the world warms just a little bit. And the kingdom reveals itself through us, like spring flowers in a late winter fall. Amen.